Welcome back, everybody, to the Deep Dive. You guys really threw us a curveball this week. I mean, we've got a lot to get through.
Yeah, there's a lot here, a lot to unpack.
There is. So we're looking at everything from mental health and how it's being portrayed on screen, all the way to, like, what's going on with global film production.
Yeah.
And then somewhere in the middle, we're also going to look at, like, the unlikely comeback of animated short films. This is a lot of stuff. So
Yeah, it seems like we're seeing a lot of shifts happening in the industry right now, both in terms of how stories are being told, but then also, how those stories are actually being made, and where they're being made. So, yeah, I think we've got a lot of interesting things to discuss.
we do. So let's just jump into it. Let's get started with this Québécois series, Empathy. This is, from what I read, a really interesting look at mental health.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that really grabbed my attention right away was that the show centers on a psychiatrist named Suzanne, who is played by Florence Longpré, who also created the show. So it's like, we're immediately kind of getting this inside perspective on the caregiver, right? And seeing how they also struggle with their own mental health, which, honestly isn't something we always see.
Right. And I was really intrigued by the use of, like, the ballerina sequences in this show. Like, it just struck me as such a unique and interesting way to represent something that's really internal, Like, what was the thinking behind that?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like they're not meant to be taken literally, like they're not actually part of the storyline.
Right.
But instead, they're more like a symbolic language for Suzanne's, like, inner turmoil, right? For her depression.
Interesting.
So it's this way of kind of, externalizing and visualizing something that's often really hard to see or even talk about.
Right. Yeah. It's a way of showing it rather than telling it. So
Exactly.
I like that. Okay, well, so Empathy is taking this really intimate approach to storytelling. And now let's kind of shift gears and talk about someone who's known for, creating these really huge and epic soundscapes. We're talking about Hans Zimmer in his new concert film, Hans Zimmer and Friends, Diamond in the Desert.
Oh, yeah. This is going to be a treat for anyone who is a fan of his work. I mean, we're talking about live performances of some of his most iconic scores, Dune, Lion King.
I mean, this film is 158 minutes long.
Right.
Like, that's a commitment.
It is. But, I think it speaks to the enduring power of his music and the impact he's had, and what's really interesting, what I thought was really fascinating was, they included these insights from people he's worked with, like, Christopher Nolan, Billie Eilish, and it just kind of underlined, like, how much thought and how much passion he puts into creating these scores that are meant to, enhance the moviegoer's experience.
Right. And I thought it was fascinating that, when he's composing, he actually composes with a specific character in mind, like a fictional character.
I know. Doris, hardworking single mom.
Right. And it's just like, I love that because it speaks to, like, his intention to create music that resonates with a wide range of people, right? It's not just this abstract thing.
Exactly. He's thinking about, like, how this is going to make the average person feel, like Doris sitting there in the movie theater, like, how's this going to affect her?
Right. Yeah. So interesting. Okay. So speaking of, like, things that affect us in the movie theater, I have to admit, I was completely surprised by this next topic. It looks like animated short films are making a comeback. Like, I had no idea.
Yeah. And this is one of those things where it's like, we really need to, like, pay attention to the numbers, right? Because Netflix just put out their engagement report for 2024. And what's fascinating is that this 10-minute short Sing thriller from the Sing universe, it came in 6th place.
Well, 6th place, ahead of, like, huge animated features like, Trolls Band Together, that Christmas. I mean, these are, like, big budget movies.
And big marketing campaigns.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what is it about this short that is, like, grabbing people's attention? And I think part of it, obviously, it's got Michael Jackson music.
Of course.
But I think it also speaks to, like, maybe a shift in how we're consuming content.
Right.
Like, maybe in this world of, like, streaming and everything, we just have shorter attention spans. And we're looking for something that's, like, quick and satisfying. And a well-made short can do that.
Yeah, I wonder if it's like a combination of things, right? Like, it's the nostalgia factor.
Yeah.
The Michael Jackson music. It's a short, easily digestible thing.
Right.
And I wonder, too, if it's just that in this world of streaming, like, maybe it's easier for something like that to kind of get lost in the shuffle, but then also easy for it to be discovered, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're just scrolling through.
Yeah. Yeah, so interesting. Okay, so let's talk about, speaking of the way content reaches audiences, Edward Berger, the director of Conclave, he had some really interesting things to say at the UK Cinema Conference about theatrical releases versus streaming releases.
Yeah, and he actually voiced this concern that, a film like Conclave, which has a really interesting premise, it might have been overlooked
Right.
if it had just gone straight to streaming.
Right.
And his argument was that, like, the theatrical release, that window is still crucial for a film to kind of build its reputation, get people talking about it, generate that, like, cultural buzz.
Yeah, and he's got a point, right?
Yeah.
Because Conclave, it did well over $110 million worldwide.
Yeah.
So that shows that, like, for certain films, that communal experience of going to the cinema,
Yeah.
It's still really valuable.
It is. And it also speaks to, like, the power of, having that limited release window.
Right.
Like, you can't see it whenever you want.
You got to go see it now or you're going to miss out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so switching gears a little bit here. Geographically, let's talk about Poland. Poland has become kind of this up-and-coming hub for film production, international film production.
Yeah, and a lot of this has to do with, like, their commitment to making it easy for international productions to come there and film, right? Like, they offer these competitive costs.
Right.
Which obviously that's always a major factor.
Huge.
But it's more than that, right? Like, they also have a very skilled workforce, a lot of experience in film production.
Yeah.
And, their locations are amazing. Like,
Ah.
they can stand in for, almost anywhere in the world.
Right. It's not just a budget thing.
No, it's not just a budget thing. And the Polish government has been really proactive in, creating these financial incentives. Like, they have a 30% cash rebate
Right.
for eligible productions.
Yes.
And they've also put in place these co-production programs that encourage, partnerships between Polish companies and international companies.
So it's like they're really trying to make themselves, a major player in the global market.
Yeah.
And it's working.
They are. I mean, look at shows like Foundation, The Interpreter of Silence.
Yeah.
These are big productions that are choosing to film there.
Yeah.
And, they're constantly kind of refining and adjusting their support schemes as well.
Oh, wow.
So, they're paying attention. They're listening to what the industry needs. They're trying to, like, make it the best possible place to film.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about something that's a little bit more individual, kind of focused on careers within Hollywood. We're seeing this trend of career coaching becoming more and more popular, for executives, writers, actors.
Yeah.
Like, what is it about this moment in time that's making that so desirable?
Well, I think part of it is, the industry's changing so rapidly, right?
Yeah.
Like with streaming and everything, like the old rules don't necessarily apply anymore. So having someone who can kind of, guide you through that, help you make strategic decisions about your career, that's invaluable.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's not just about, getting your next job right.
No.
It's also about, like, leadership development,
Exactly.
networking, personal branding. It's like really becoming like the best version of yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, for a lot of people in Hollywood, there's this sense of, like, it's so competitive. It's so unpredictable.
Right.
So to have someone who can kind of, like, be in your corner, help you navigate those waters, that's huge.
It's really important, I bet. Okay, last but not least, I want to talk about this BBC documentary series, Twitter, Breaking the Bird. This sounds like it's going to be fascinating.
Oh, yeah. I can't wait for this one. I think it's going to be really interesting to kind of get a, like, behind-the-scenes look at the evolution of Twitter, right?
Right.
Like from, its humble beginnings, this idea of a digital town square to, like, all the challenges it's facing now under Elon Musk.
And they've got new interviews with the co-founders.
I know, Ev Williams and Biz Stone.
Yeah.
Like, imagine hearing directly from them
I know.
about their vision for the platform and then, like, how that vision has changed, over time.
Right, and how it's been shaped by all these different forces.
Right.
And it's not just them, right? Like, they're also talking to, like, former employees, journalists.
Yes, lots of different perspectives. Kara Swisher is one of them, and she's been covering Twitter since, like, day one.
Right.
So I think it's going to be this, like, really rich and nuanced look at, like, how Twitter has impacted our world,
For better or for worse.
Exactly.
So, I mean, this has been a lot.
It has been a lot.
Like from intimate stories about mental health to like massive global trends in the film industry.
Yeah, and it's kind of amazing to see how interconnected it all is, right?
Right.
Like, the choices that creators make on a show like Empathy.
Right.
Those can resonate with people all over the world.
Right.
And then, Edward Berger's point about theatrical releases.
Right.
Like that speaks to the power of distribution.
Right.
And how that shapes how a story is received. And then, Poland becoming this like hub for film production.
Right.
That's a story about economics, about government policy, about global trends.
And the animated short film Sing Thriller.
Yes.
Like that speaks to how audience habits are changing, right?
Right.
Like what we're looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's all connected. It's all part of the same story.
It is.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I think the question that I'd like to leave you guys with today is, given all of these trends that we've talked about, like, what do you think is the single most significant force shaping the future of media right now? And why? And with that, we're going to wrap up the deep dive for this week.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.